Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to Coffee Talk! So today we're going to continue talking about Egyptian stuff. And today we're going to talk about the Sphinx, the giant cat statue with the head of a pharaoh that doesn't quite fit on its body in and adjacent to the Great Pyramids. In the most recent previous Coffee Talk, we talked about the pyramids and how the pyramids are designed to withstand the flood. That the very shape of the pyramid was designed for the purpose of surviving a global catastrophe that was warned that the people of the earth were warned by angels, extraterrestrials, angels. I don't know, angels aren't from around here, so I guess they're ETs by nature, huh? Extraterrestrial means from someplace other than Earth. So I don't believe any of us think that angels are native to Earth, right? So these angels came and told humans that this flood was coming. And Noah made the ark, and apparently Enoch made these pyramids that they used technological engineering and understanding to create a structure that would withstand the flood for the purpose of storing human history so that the history of the earth would not be lost. Noah saved the humans and the animals, and Enoch, however you say it. And down in Texas, we say Enoch. But Enoch, he saved human history by hiding it in these pyramids. And that's kind of the conclusion I came to after a deep study of this, that the very shape of the pyramid, the fact that it looks like a pyramid sinker, that its design would turn the force of a tsunami and use the force of a tsunami to drive a pyramid deeper down into its subfooting instead of lifting it out and washing it away like any other shaped building would. And I think more proof lies in the Sphinx. The Sphinx does in fact show water erosion. This is very puzzling because it's in the middle of a desert. However, I believe that what you're seeing in the water damage along the foot and underside all the way around the bottom of the Sphinx is not wind erosion like they claim. It's evidence that it too survived the flood, but it was designed not to survive. It wasn't specifically designed for the flood because it predates the disaster. It's a relic and a leftover piece of this previous culture. Most scientists who look at this and engineers agree, along with archaeologists, that the Sphinx originally was a statue of a cat. And cats are a big part of Egyptian lore, part of their pantheon. And so this was a cat statue. It did not get washed away by the flood because of its immense size, although it was very, very damaged. The head of the cat had been completely dislodged, for the most part, the face at any rate, and leaving only a stub where the head used to be. And the foot and bottom part of the Sphinx around its foundation was eroded by water. This water damage can clearly be seen with the naked eye, and there are several scientists, most of them part of the ancient alien theory crowd, but they are scientists nonetheless that have put in the work. And they have come to the conclusion that the Sphinx did survive a flood and was damaged. Now, a future pharaoh post flood, a future Egyptian pharaoh would later save the Sphinx by marking it with his own ego and put his own head onto the cat animal. And he salvaged the sculpture and the history of this cat statue that had survived the flood, and also got an ego boost by putting his own face on it and letting everybody know who was responsible for saving the cat statue, which had been damaged in the flood. Now, there's a lot of speculation about and mystery and lore about secret compartments within the Sphinx itself. There is a legend that says there was a library of golden tablets or discs that contained the history of the pre-diluvian world, the history of this previous civilization, what it was like, how the people lived, and why it was eventually destroyed. And this information is, according to legend, hidden somewhere inside the Sphinx. This could be another copy of the same documents that were put into the put inside of the pyramids in a secret room under the capstone. If you go back and look at that video, I talk about how the illuminists on the dollar bill show the capstone elevated, and I believe they're not showing the completion of the pyramid, but the removal of the capstone and the discovery of this cache of pre-diluvian history. A similar cache or a related cache may be found in a secret room in the Sphinx as well. If you had to bank on structures that would have survived from the pre-diluvian civilization, the giant cat statue would have had to have come high ranking, because it in fact did in some form survive. So somewhere on the Sphinx there may be these secret compartments. Now, not every pyramid is pre-flood and a survivor of the flood. I think the Great Pyramid of Giza is the only one I know for sure. Seems to have evidence that points to its existence prior to the flood, its survival of the flood, and potentially its intentional construction and design with the idea of surviving the flood in mind to begin with. And there are other structures that seem to have survived the flood, and there are pyramids and other structures that have been built as a tribute or in imitation of the Great Pyramid many centuries after the flood. Some of these pyramids, as the ones found in Mesoamerica, in Central America, Mexico, these step pyramids are rebuilt homages. They're paying honor to the not the Sphinx, but the Great Pyramid of Giza. And so these step pyramids are more from our time. Hang on, I'm going to take a drink of coffee. They're not pre-diluvian, they're post-diluvian. They're after the flood. However, there seems to be pyramids now being discovered in Antarctica and at the bottom of the ocean. And other giant statues of similar construction to the Sphinx have been found submerged under the ocean. And so some of these structures survived, but have fallen victim to the reshaping of the continents and the redistribution of water on the planet. So I think that the Mayan culture, the Aztecs in Central and South America, these cultures were founded by survivors of the Great Flood. These were people who had memories of and history that dated back to the pre-diluvian times. I think that their religion of sacrifice, and I don't mean that in the Christian way, but in the heathen way, their human sacrifice ideas and their animal sacrifice ideas are based in the pre-diluvian religion that was part of the reason why God did not save that culture and save all of those people, but just a remnant of humans, animals, and knowledge were spared. Now, I believe part of the reason why that destruction happened is because of the tampering that this Atlantean or pre-diluvian society was doing with the DNA of humans and animals. And that's part of why complete destruction was necessary, because they had changed life, flora, fauna, and even the human body itself through genetic manipulation, crossbreeding, genetic cloning, and other such technologies that we are just now starting to discover or rediscover, as it were. So you have copycat cultures and religions that use the pyramid, maybe also parts of the religion and mythology and lore of pre-diluvian gods as their new form of religion, as their new form of culture, and others that got basically knocked back to the Stone Age, and they had to come up with no memory of antediluvian times and the Atlantis culture, we could call it. But the Sphinx, I believe, is probably one of the best preserved although it's been altered. It's one of the best preserved examples of this art or religious art or even idols of immense size that were commonplace in Atlantis and in the pre-diluvian society. That similar type gods, goddesses, animal gods, sculptures, and art can be found around the world that seem to mysteriously date to before the Great Flood. I don't necessarily hold to the 6,000 year time period, 6,000-year-old Earth that Christian theologians hold to. I believe that it's impossible to capture exactly how much time has passed, and it could have been 6,000 years or 60. And there's a lot of question marks on coming down to time periods. We really just have to kind of look at the fossil record. Part of this world was completely underwater a long time ago. This we know. It appears there was a civilization that existed prior to the Great Flood, and elements of it and pieces of it and hints of it have survived. And cultures throughout the world in ancient history seem to exhibit a copycat kind of religion that is deeply rooted to Egyptian worship and what may have been the religion of Atlantis. More coffee. Drink them if you got them. Just a quick reminder to like, subscribe, and contribute to this channel through PayPal and Patreon, and keep the videos coming. I'm also a Christian minister, and that's the main focus here. But I like to talk about these mysteries, especially when they involve God and the Bible and antiquities. Back on the religious tip, the whole concept of public human sacrifice is something that can't really be explained. I've talked about it being an evil spirit, being the demonic form of worship, or a way of paying tribute to these ancient gods with a little g, these devils, these fallen angels, these Nephilim, these devils. Name them, call them what you want. But they worship them, and it could be that in the previous incarnation of this earth, known as the antediluvian or pre-flood time, that these demon spirits, these ancient aliens, these gods with a little g, these Nephilim, these fallen angels, were actually walking in physical form in this world at the time. And these religions were based around them, about giving them tribute. Apparently they need blood. Apparently they need food. Apparently they need gold. And so by bringing these offerings to these places of worship, you could appease these angry gods, and they would pay you back in some way, like healing through some kind of medicine that seemed like magic to the person involved. It could have been that they paid you back by blessing your area with rain, because they might have had technology or the ability to control the weather in some way. And that when you start to tie all of the ancient stories, all of the ancient religions, including Judaism, tying all of this together, you start to come up with what looks like the concept that this world has been around for much longer than we can imagine. I have reason to believe, by studying Native American stories, other creation stories, all the way back to Assyria and the Babylonians and the Anunnaki, that these stories seem to suggest that even the Atlantis level of society was a spin-off of a previous one, also destroyed potentially by the impact of a great meteor. What could have caused the flood? The Bible tells us that the flood was an intentional judgment brought on by God. But when I start to look at the non-biblical accounts, when I start to look at everything like the Book of Enoch, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and other ancient stories, you start to see a situation where potentially a extinction level event was headed straight for the earth, one that would turn the earth off of its axis, one that would cause a pole reversal, one that would cause a massive flood and the destruction of everyone on earth through this great tsunami or this swarm of tsunamis. And God has the decision to intervene or to let this occur, and the decision is made that the earth is not worth saving, and they only want to save certain things, and the rest of it is corrupted, potentially by these fallen angels, potentially corrupted by these Nephilim giants that become cannibalistic, potentially corrupted through these demigods who were ruling the earth. In Atlantis, in Egypt, in South America, in another kingdom that is now submerged off the coast of Japan. But this global culture had technology, probably biotechnology, the kind of technology that we haven't really developed yet, and that's why it still looks like magic to us. And they were using these abilities and powers to control and manipulate humanity, and mankind was suffering, and mankind was not in a good place. And so, as we see in the book of Enoch, a destruction has been either chosen by God and implemented or allowed by God to continue. And only certain people and things and knowledges were preserved. The bare minimum. And even though this occurred, it does appear that giants survived the flood. We have them in a smaller form, in the form of Goliath and other giants mentioned when the people of Israel come out of the wilderness. And Moses is not allowed to cross over the river into the promised land, and they enter the promised land that it is already occupied by giants. The favorite Bible story of childhood, David and Goliath, is an example of one of those giants. Other named giants are measured and described in the same passages in the Bible that they talk about these kings of immense size. Whose beds were 17, 18, and 20 feet long, and their feet still hung off. My son is 6'5". I had to buy a special bed for him when he lived with me because his feet hang off, about this far. And it's not comfortable for him unless he has an extended long person or big man bed. So the beds of these giants were enormous. And so everything about this pre-diluvian world was enormous. The stones they used to create the structures that I'm talking about and referring to that survived the flood. Pumapunku in Peru is an amazing structure. It is a combination of these huge stone blocks the size of school buses that have an interlocking pattern, kind of like floor tile. So when they have the kind of like tongue and groove, where you have this locking piece that goes into this piece, and it's so tight. The connection in these blocks are so tight. They're H blocks. They almost look like something a kid would get to build stuff out of, like Legos, but they're enormous. They're the size of buses and made out of stone. And other parts of these structures and other structures, some in the Middle East, look like that once the stones were laid, somehow these stones were heated up and melted together like marshmallows melted into a bunch. Like, when you get your candy bar and it used to be a whole square, and now it's rounded and softened and more shaped to whatever it was sitting on. That they heated up these rocks somehow with technology or magic or whatever you want to call it, and caused these structures to be fitted together so tightly that many of those structures survived the flood. Although most of them are just remnants and rubble left over. They were still destroyed by the flood, and only parts of them remained. I think the parts of this kingdom, this pre-diluvian kingdom, Atlantis, if you want to call it that, the world of the giants, the titans, the demigods, the Greek gods, this is a time before the flood when these angel creatures walked amongst us and had their way with us, quite frankly, in many ways. But if you go to these structures that are underwater, they're better preserved, because it seems like that the waters rose before the tsunamis hit. So in certain areas they were already lower when the earth changed its axis and the pole reversal happened, that some of the areas were close enough to the edge of the water that the water just came over them, and they didn't get that blast of surface water, the tsunami blast that other sites did. So there's some better preserved sites, I think, both underwater and in Antarctica, where pyramids are being discovered there. There's talk that there's a big discovery in Antarctica that's being covered up. And because we are experiencing an ice reduction in some of those areas. Some of those structures are becoming evident and visible now from aerial photographs and from satellites. So what we have is a world before our world. What we have is a technology and a civilization and a genetic makeup of the inhabitants that bear almost no resemblance to today's world. And it was all changed in a global cataclysm. Do you believe the Sphinx was a cat statue that's head was ripped off in the flood and replaced with a retrofitted, arrogant head of a pharaoh, potentially the one who also patched and repaired and restored the Great Pyramid of Giza as well? Could it be Khufu, whose head is on the cat? And was that a cat before? It makes sense that these enormous structures that we see were the result of giants. They stacked the pyramid blocks in one at a time like bricks because the giants that built the pyramids were that big. The giants that built Pumapunka were that big. Or they had some kind of elevation technology, some electronic or vibrational magnetic method to move these giant blocks around. And it all makes sense if you understand that there was once a world that was destroyed in a flood, and we have almost no idea what that world looked like. But trust me, it wasn't just a bunch of sheep farmers and just a bunch of agricultural people. That this was an advanced society, a very old society, a society that had become completely corrupted by the demonic and by these fallen angels who had spread both their technology and their seed and DNA throughout the world till the only way that we could reset was through this global flood. So what do you think? Tell me in the comment section. Is the world only 6,000 years old? Were the pyramids really just made a couple thousand years ago by Khufu? Or are they much, much older structures? What do you think about the pyramids surviving the flood better than the Sphinx? And it's because of their shape. I think I'm onto something. Pyramids are pyramid shaped because they were designed to survive a tsunami. Tell me what you think in the comment section. Don't forget to support the channel so I don't have to dig ditches and I can keep making videos for y'all. Give me a thumbs up. Join Patreon. Contribute to keeping me doing what I do and supporting the ministry that I do on this channel and the ministry that I do out in the world. I have an update for you and a ministry story to tell this week. And I've gone from victory to victory, and I've managed to do a lot of good for a lot of good people and turn some lives around by hearing the word directly from God, hearing the Holy Spirit, and acting on His instructions. So support the channel and keep my head above water. That's my head above water flood. Get it? We'll see you next time on Coffee Talk.